Good evening, everyone. I'm really glad that we are finally here. The whole pack is here. And this is the first panel of our conference addressing student performance in literacy and numeracy. And we have the first paper by Dr. Helen Abadzi, Perceptually Enhanced Textbooks for Early Grade Readings, Why They Get Results. So, Dr. Helen, I don't need to remind you, you have 10-15 minutes, and for translation, for other people, they can just use the icon below or leave it later. We can translate that for you. And Dr. Helen, you're welcome to start.
Are you able to see the screen?
Excellent. Yes, we can see.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's see if full screen works. Worldwide, again, there is a big emphasis on fundamental skills. I'm going to 20 years ago, they were talking about basic skills, not the main. But everyone says, why are the students failing to read English, basic reading in various languages and scripts? And of course, do. And so what are we doing? Of course, with the pandemic, a lot of people are being missed. What else can be done? A whole lot can be done. And these days, there's neuroscience that can actually inform us on this. The trouble is that the people even who talk about neuroscience, reading specialists, are talking about language and the ways that the language enters, the brain, and what it does. They're skipping the very first upfront component, which is the visual. And they're also skipping the issue that working memory requires a whole lot of stuff going into it, very limited, and disappearing very fast, which means then that we need speed. So today I will talk within a very few minutes about the perceptual learning processes, and I will show it about this from some of the pictures. The perceptual learning is something nobody's ever heard of, almost. Even few psychologists deal with it. But it means that the brain of not just, but also animals has the capacity to take lines that you see and put them together into shapes with experience. That is, you practice enough times and the brain does it all by itself. So here is the circle. I presume that many of you see a letter A, but really the receptors are lines. Now, those who know the Latin script will see an A. Those who know Japanese will see a hey here. Those who know Hebrew will see a ka. And those who don't know anything will just see a bunch of lines. This is the essence of this. Our brain connects these into the hey, the a, the ka, etc. It's an easy process for the brain. That is, animals do this effortlessly. We do this. Our world is complete. And when we consciously learn something, what we see is that a little bit of practice and exposure actually makes lines come together in shapes. For example, X-ray interpretation. First day you look at it, or if you and I look at it, we just see a bunch of shapes. Those who get trained within like 3 days, they can tell you this is a tumor, this is a tumor. The ability stays on. They don't forget so easily. Same thing, music. Any one of you who has learned music, to me, all this is gibberish, but to people very quickly, they will focus on this and they will focus with practice on how to play instruments or speak their voice on these things. And they don't forget. And with practice, little by little, you get these very complex screens that if you show these to an illiterate or even first grade or somebody with less education, they couldn't possibly interpret it. But look at all of these visual aspects that once they become small patterns, small shapes become connected into bigger shapes, they tell us stuff and they as one piece into our working memory. And then we can tell things that we could not imagine. This is the issue that is missing from reading. And if we're looking at reading, the simplest shapes are learned fastest. So this, for example, an A is learned faster than a calligraphic A, which is, of course, why calligraphy is not a good idea to do. But the more complex shapes require discrimination. So, for instance, people who are learning Devanagari, the I, da, ha, d, you need to discriminate against among these. So it takes more practice. Devanagari is transparently is read the way it and the way you do it. An important feature in perceptual learning is letter size and spacing in the beginning, also distant from the blackboard. Those who are habituated, we will read small letters quickly, letters, and we don't notice it. So actually, we think that the children will do the same. All of the books are cramped, particularly the Arabic books with small cramped letters with much blank space. No, it's quite the opposite. What the research of perceptual psychologists shows is at least this size of a book in the Latin script, at least. This is how we did it in Arabic with the Alajmi Foundation. So that then developed a textbook and piloted, has gone through 2 rounds of piloting in the Alazmi Foundation in Khaimah with 4 schools. And then COVID stopped a whole lot of stuff, to where the children are taught letter by letter by letter, combining into shapes this large. And yes, they do very well. Compare this to this in Tamil, which nobody can read. And for some reason, people who are automatic readers think that this busy design is going to have to do something to help the children interpret the texts. Education seems to have done something to it. This is an Ottoman Turkish textbook in Turkish, in the Ottomans, in the Arabic script from about 1896. And you see these letters, they're single, they're rather large, and you can actually learn from them. But today's Urdu, this is a textbook. I know Urdu quite well. I cannot make any sense of it. I know Arabic quite well. I cannot make any sense of it, but to a middle class learned teacher or parent, it makes sense. We see violations of perceptual learning principles everywhere. All of this whole language approach and whole words means that the students have to automatize these complicated patterns instead of starting small and becoming big, larger and larger, which is what really perceptual learning demands. So, of course, they can't do this very well. Another one from Egypt at the time, you put all of these letters back down and in a flower, and of course, the children are completely confused as to what is the target and what are the distractors. These letters become, thus reading, early grade reading becomes identification of a target against distractors, which is of course not the point at all. The point is, what is the name, what is the sound of a target of a target letter, a target shape, and if you put them together, then what do you get? Again, the children must practice letter by letter reading until a part in the brain that recognizes words as faces. And when the face recognition mode turns on, then we see the entire...
Dr. Helen, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. So perceptual learning completely depends on the sheer number of trials. Well, we tried that a few years ago in Tamil Nadu, Ghana, huge letters, we see immediate results. In the Alazmi Foundation, the various rounds showed us children doing this twice a week for like an hour and a half. Huge differences by the end. For example, the children were able to read 29 words versus 20 That's a lot of difference. And it was not for a minute. They actually let them finish the 60-word chapter. When did they stop? We see, even with this small identification, even with this low amount of exposure, and children who are not poor, who see a whole lot of stuff, a big difference. And that's what we see that needs to happen in all of the Arabic countries. Effect sizes 0.5, 0.7, large effect sizes. So these things do mean something. The children really need to become literate in grade. Arabic children fall behind in grade 1 and never catch up. So the curricula really should follow perceptual learning and results. And for the oral language, it needs to be taught orally. Standard Arabic needs to be taught orally at a different time. So we need to be able to say, you want complex skills in 21st century, you need to put together those very low level, apparently, skills that don't particularly enthuse us. But we need that because some of this, the role of speed cannot be, is indispensable. We need to read very fast in order for working memory to retain a message and make sense out of it. We also need to comprehend very fast. All of this happens very well, can be done very well, what we see. The Al-Qasimi Foundation has been very forward-looking in supporting and develop this initiative, and which has been taken up by the Queen Aranya Foundation through a grant, and now the American University of Cairo is taking it up. So I hope that others do too. Since this is a very short presentation, kindly remember, if you would like a lot of perceptual learning, I'm going to be giving a pre-conference seminar in the Comparative and International Education Society conference in April. You can look me up if you're registered on that, and then I will go through a lot of this type of material with a lot of explanation.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Helen. Actually, we were talking about lines. I was thinking about the, I don't know, I wonder if you have seen Dr. What's his name? Professor Tim Ingold, A Theory of Lines. He's talking about the same things that you were talking about. And it's an anthropological theory of lines, where this perception of learning came from. So thank you very much. And I want to make a small note for everyone here that the timing is going to be 10 to 15 maximum. And I thank Dr. Helen for being very persistent about this. And we will, if you have any question, you can use the QA icon up there. You can write it down, and we will take it at the end. Now we have another interesting paper by Dr. Juwaeriah Siddiqui from Carleton University, exploring attractor states that impact motivation among level 2 learners of Arabic in the UAE. So Juwaeriah, you're welcome to start. You can start your paper now.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. Thank you for having me here, and thank you, Dr. Helen, also for your wonderful introduction to your topic. I'm really interested because I work with second language speakers of Arabic in the United Arab Emirates. I would be interested in learning more about your literacy project. So I will quickly share my screen. 1 second. Okay, here it is. All right. So once again, good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Juwaeriah Siddiqui, and I'm actually a doctoral student, not yet a doctor, at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. And I reside in Dubai, and my work is with non-native speakers of the Arabic language. So by non-native, I mean those who do not study Arabic as a part of their heritage language, but because for other reasons, such as because they are in a Gulf country, for example, because
very interesting.
For religious reasons, etc. And the main reason why I was inspired to start this project and to start the study was because I've had so many people asking me, هل تتكلمين العربية? And I say, لا. لا أنا لا أتكلم العربية. I do not speak Arabic. And this is not just like as a non-native speaker, this was not something that just I faced, but also I grew up in Saudi Arabia. A lot of people I see who are growing up in the United Arab Emirates also have the same problem where they study Arabic, but they're not able to speak it. So really, what is happening here? And that was the question I'm trying to answer. So let's begin with what's the purpose of my research. So as you know, Arabic is the official language of the United Arab Emirates. We have a large Arabic speaking community here, in the expat as well as the local community. And a lot of like social and cultural elements, along with religious, that really influence the second language learner of Arabic. So it is very different to a person who's learning English in, say, a small place in Sweden, for example, where they might not really meet English speaking population. And so that really got me thinking, why do we have low proficiency in Arabic as non-native speakers, even though we are learning the language? And this is it's a very, very big challenge, right? To understand such a huge problem. But I began with exploring motivation, not as a variable, which is like, oh, is a child motivated or not motivated? More rather looking at motivation as a system. So when I say system, I mean it is something which is complex, and I want to understand the language learner, how they are interconnected with all the components, by their neighbors who are Arabic speaking or not, by the school that's teaching Arabic or not, by the cultural affiliations that the family, the school, the teachers, everything, all of that has an influence on each other. And this is basically called the immediate learning environment, and that really influences the language learner. So I condensed it to 2 research questions to begin my exploration. The first is, what attitudes of motivation do language learners of Arabic have? And how does this compare to the educator's view? Because we are always looking, as researchers, we are looking at, oh, is the child motivated or not? But in this, I wanted to bring in the child's view in front. So my research study is designed in a way that the student's opinion, their relationship with Arabic is explored through their own interpretation. And I compare that with how the educators perceive it. So that's the first phase that I'm working on right now. I'm working with the school in Ras Al Khaimah, exploring this first phase of my research. And the second phase is I'll be looking at typical archetypes. And now this is very, very interesting, and maybe not something that's done in language learning so much. So usually we try to look at where the learner is, what will happen if you give this kind of intervention, what happens pre-test, post-test. In the second phase, what I plan to do is look at learners and try to identify a finite number of I would say motivational manifestations. So that would mean typical motivational styles. And then for each of those typical styles, I hope to trace back their development. So basically saying, okay, these are the kind of students that we have, non-native learners. They have gone through the system of learning Arabic in UAE, in the school, because it's mandatory. But not everybody has the same attitude towards Arabic, the same kind of motivation style. So what differentiates a learner who is really, really motivated to go ahead versus somebody who is, oh, he just wants to do it for, say, religious reasons, versus somebody who's like done and dusted. So there are a finite number of solutions that are possible, and that's what I will be looking at. So this is a little more technical. The framework that I'm using is Dorney's theoretical framework, motivational self system. That again, which very interestingly, a lot of work has been done on the second language learner's ideal self and auto self, and mainly for learning English as a second language. But when you look at this third small component here, the learning experience, there's very, very little empirical evidence that shows us what role does the learning experience play in a second language learner's motivation, as well as overall learning proficiency and performance. And there's a good reason for that. One is because learning experience is a hard thing to measure. How do I take in every individual and really map out their individual history and how the learning has influenced them? That's the first thing. The second thing is there hasn't been an appropriate theoretical framework that can help in the conceptualizing learning experience. For example, the ideal self is what a learner hopes to become, and ought to self is what others expect of him. Now, these are theories that are based more in possible selves theory in linguistics, and they're easy to define, easy to measure, and a lot of work has been done with that respect. So what I'm focusing is on the learning experience and combining it with a different field. That's what makes this a little interdisciplinary, the complexity theory. And complexity theory is essentially a theory of change. And that's what a learner does, right? His language journey, his or her language journey is constantly changing. So I'm really trying to bring in applied linguistics, or so should I say complexity theory, into the fold of applied linguistics in order to map the learner's learning experience. So this is my research design. The first one addresses the first question that I spoke about, where I try to map their attitude. And the second phase is where I try to identify the typical learning outcomes. So right now I'm in phase one, almost near to completion of data, like collecting the data. I have students have generated data, and I just had a focus group discussion yesterday where the students club those statements into groups, and I will be generating concept maps. Now, what's a concept map? Before I go to that, let's quickly look at the kind of, this is just a sneak peek of the kind of responses that the non-native speakers, and again, this is a small, but not many students, I would say like 30, 40 students, but hopefully I plan to do on a larger scale as well. But this study I have done with 30, 40 students. So these are the kind of statements that they produce, like, oh, I've never taught, I have been taught Arabic just for namesake, never learned it seriously, or I don't understand it much, or I feel like I could not become a proficient Arabic speaker. So this is telling us a lot about what's going on around the speaker, around the learner, and really looking at what are the key factors, or not factors, but more like what are the key motivational styles, and exploring them in depth will help us understand where to intervene, even as teachers, curriculum developers, or policymakers, because we cannot be addressing all of them together. And because Arabic is so diverse, and just the reasons why people learn Arabic is also different. It's not just, oh, for a job, or for religion, to be able to understand the Friday khutbah. You when you start asking for reasons, there are plenty. But then how do we really make ourselves work with finite solutions? So this is what a concept map looks like. And I'll be creating one for students and comparing that with the educators' idea of what motivates or does not motivate the children, to see, is it similar or is it different? Do they have the same idea about why they learn Arabic? And do the educators also agree or have dissimilar views? Now, the second phase, and I hope to start that very soon, is where I start identifying typical motivational styles, and then hold a questionnaire to really identify these core students and then interview them. And that's in that qualitative process, you are really tracing their development. Now comes the icing on the cake. What does a developmental trajectory look like in a social sciences environment? Because that's something which is like, perhaps you do it for like
5 minutes, Juwaeriah. 5 minutes.
Okay. So perhaps you do it for, say, the development of a virus, right? Or for the way like a production line is going high or low, things of that sort. So how does it work for languages? Something which is so abstract, something that you cannot really see. So this is a technique that is still coming up in the field of applied linguistics. It's called retrodictive qualitative modeling. And what that does is, so this is like exactly, if you look at top to bottom, bottom top, so up down, sorry. So you basically start from the base, the learners. So you have the learners, and then we are trying to identify some limited outcomes. You recognize those key archetypes, and then you trace, okay, so for say archetype A, this is what happened. For archetype B, this is what happened. And that's how you will be able to identify key intervention points in improving their motivational experience and ultimately their performance. in the Arabic language. So this is what this is a sample for teacher immunity. The study basically looked at the types of immunity styles teachers develop when they are placed in different environments with different schools, etc. Imagine something like this for a language learner, a second language learner. And then, so basically what you have at the base here, that's where basically where you have your key motivational styles. Like, oh, maybe the one type of learner is very innovative in learning the language. Another one is fossilized, very static, doesn't really, one is defeated, doesn't care. I mean, this is what I will have to like look into starting with phase 2. And with that, this is what I create. So let's, for example, say the defeated teacher. You see the stages on the left. Every archetype goes through certain stages. A triggering stage. So this is basically the attractor stage. This is the stage where they're exposed to the language. Some of them might have a different exposure to like the vast majority, but everybody has a stage where they're exposed, starting at home, starting in school, starting with the teacher, etc. Then there's an adaptive stage where things that might be going well, might not be going well, but then they're coping. Maybe like, so say for a defeated teacher, they cope through withdrawal, etc. For a visionary, they cope by channeling the frustration into something better. So this is the kind of chart I wish I will be able to create with my second language learners and their motivational style. And after the linking stage, there's a realignment stage where they reconfigure and move towards self-actualization, self-efficacy, etc. And the stabilization phase. And this is where I feel a lot of the work will be done for teachers, where they say, so my learner, this is how they started, this is what they are, and this is what they have settled into. And that really helps in understanding
2 minutes
how we can intervene. So that is my research project, my doctoral thesis, and I am working with Ras Al Khaimah at school at Ras Al Khaimah. And the COVID has definitely made a lot of changes to the plan, but we are hoping that in the long run, we are able to really improve the learning experience of Arabic language learners, not just in the United Arab Emirates, but also in the region. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Juwaeriah. This is really interesting, and I like the meta-theoretical framework. Although I didn't understand it, but I like the words. I will have to ask you about it.
Thank you.
Meta-theoretical. Okay, good. So we also have. Thank you. We also have another interesting paper by two scholars, Abdulaziz and Alenezi from Virginia Tech and Ayeshah Alazmi, Kuwait University, the effect of home and school characteristics on GCC student academic achievement, insights from TIMSS 2015 data. So Abdulaziz and Ayeshah.
Thank you, Dr. Yes, let me just start sharing my screen. I'm assuming you're seeing my screen now, right?
It's all clear, yes.
Okay, let me just... Okay, do you see the full screen now?
Very good.
Okay, great.
I was going to tell you, just expand it a little bit. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we started now.
All right. First of all, thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for oversighting this session. And I would like to thank all the organizers of this great conference, Dr. Uhud Al-Asfour, and all the people behind the scenes that we don't get to know their names. And this is basically a joint work with my colleague, Dr. Ayeshah Alazmi from Kuwait University. And the topic of our project was the effect of home and school characteristics on GCC students. Let me minimize this. For the GCC math achievement, and we just used the TIMSS data that we had access to from the 2015. And this is just a brief outline of this presentation. First, I will start with a brief background of TIMSS data, the GCC participation, what I mean by the Gulf countries who participated in TIMSS, and also we'll look or get a general idea about their performance. And we'll talk about the problem statement, the method, the results, and finally the conclusions. So what is TIMSS? TIMSS stands for the Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study. It's sponsored by the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement. And it's been conducted every 4 years since its first cycle in 1995. And the target populations for this large-scale study is the 4th grade and 8th grade students. And the database basically includes the math and science achievement scores, as well as some background information from students, parents, teachers, and principals. And it really a big data set that a lot of researchers across the world using to inform the policy and to inform, further research. It gives an overall assessment of how much students have learned from their national curriculum in math and science. And I want to stress one thing about this point. A lot of criticism I hear or read is that the TIMSS or these large scale data don't reflect what students learn in the school because it's not, for some reason, it's not aligned with the curriculum. And that is not true, because every country has been asked by I think, a curriculum specialist from their respective Ministry of Education and been asked what is covered in the curriculum. And based on that, the test was developed. So it measures the national curriculum, what is intended by each country. And based on that, students are tested. So it's kind of a fair, across countries. And basically they take a sample of 4,000 to 5,000 students from about 150 schools from each participating country. And at that time, the 2015, 60 countries participated. This is just a brief outline, as you can see from the 1995, what's interesting, only Kuwait, participated from the Gulf region, none of them in 1999. And then you can see the 2015, all of them, and the 2019, which I think the data set has been just released a month or two ago. As you can see from this distribution for mathematical achievement, the TIMSS scale center point, which is the average for all these countries, is 500. And you can see from the red boxes how the GCC countries, students are performing in math achievement. United Arab Emirates, 452, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. And this is from the 2015. All of these scores are significantly less than the average of the international scale. But another point I would like to stress here is, as you can see, usually an average score does hide a lot of information, and we think of it as representing most of the students. Yes, that is true to some extent, but as you can see, for example, for Kuwait, although the average is 353, you can see we have some students who scored less than 200. But at the same time, we have students who scored above the international average. So I think we can still learn from the schools within each countries what makes them unique, and that their students are performing well above the average. And the problem statement here, just basically what led us, to investigate this. And I'm very particularly interested in these large scale, data set, TIMSS and PEARLS and PISA and all these, because that's the point of, collecting this large scale data sets, a lot of information, about probably 700 variables in each data set. It gives us a lot of information that we have to use and kind of get a sense what is going on in a given educational system, and what should we do in order to reform or advance or move forward. And I want to just stress the second bullet points here is that researchers and policymakers and basically all stakeholders cannot reform an education system, or at least talk about reforming education system unless they know exactly what component of the system is broken. In other words, what are the effects that we're seeing? Just for an example, we see that the math achievement is significantly lower than international. So the question is, what is broken? We got the answer. Our math and science achievement scores for our students are not that well compared to other countries. So the next one is why it's broken. And unfortunately, that's what we usually don't see. We pinpoint the problem, but we don't investigate what is going on. Why is it broken? So basically, we need to identify what are the factors that distinguish high achieving and low achieving students. What are the factors that make some schools excellent, some schools struggling? Once we identify the factors, the idea is just we need to manipulate or actually just change the causes, at least in the hope or hoping that we can achieve the effects that we want. And the purpose of our exploratory study is just to measure the math achievement variation between schools, like how much schools vary in terms of student achievement in math subject. Do schools differ between each other? And also to examine what is the role of home resources, early literacy and numeracy, and teacher perception of school instruction and leadership. Our sample, since it's a very exploratory study, we basically combined all the students' data from all GCC countries. And as you can see, the sample size of 38,279 fourth graders coming from all GCC countries. We collapsed them on one sample, and these students coming from 1,550 schools. And we got this obviously from the TIMSS data 2015. And we used a statistical technique called multi-level modeling, where we can kind of see how much variation in the students' achievement within the schools and how much variation in the math achievement across the school. And that's actually very important in terms of policy making, because if we know how much variation in the schools, like how much schools differ from each other, I think we can start, having some idea of what needs to be changed across the schools, like just, borrowing what is being done in a good way in the schools that are achieving good results and try to mimic that with the low achieving schools. This is just a descriptive for the variables of interest here. And I just want to make a note here about the variable. The first box is the variables that were measured by. Thank you. The first box is just the variables that came from either the students or their parents. And we have, as you can see, we have 5 math achievement. That's just a technical issue. We basically have math scores and the home resources for learning. And these were measured like, did the students have an internet connection, their own room, what is the education level of their parents and all that. And it was kind of an aggregate or an index that can measure how much students have that can support their learning in their home. And the early literacy numeracy activity, this is just basically a questionnaire that was filled out by their parents. And it was asking them what are the frequency of some activities, like how frequent do you read books to your kids and all that. And the second box are the school level variables. And private, we were not sure actually if it representing private schools or not, because there was no mention about the school type. But it's kind of a proxy, because the exact way it was measured, it was the language of the test. And we're not certain if it represents the private sector, but basically this variable, whether the school gave the students the test in English language. And that's why we thought about it in, as representing private school. Here's our results, and we were kind of surprised of how much variation is, in between schools. So basically, this part of the output represent the variation between schools, and this part, the random effect within, represent how much variation within schools. And you can see from here that we have 0.44, which means 44% of the students' math achievement. The variation in math achievement lies between schools. And I have not seen anything in the literature that shows this percentage. Usually we have 15 to 20% variation across the schools, in other samples. So the lesson or the takeaway here, what characteristics schools have do matter to student math achievement. It's not only what the home provides, but also what is the systematic component that some schools have that made their students achieve, higher score in math achievement. And here, the school variables, as you can see, we have a significant effect. There is basically a difference between those who got the test in English language and those who took the test in Arabic language. And the difference on math achievement was 56. Same thing with the leadership, and it was
2 minutes, Abdulaziz.
Thank you. 2 items from the questionnaire that measured the instructional leadership at the school. And also this had an effect on the student math achievement. Also with the home resources for learning also has an effect. The English language literacy activities also have an effect, but we were focusing just this at the school level, whether the leadership provided at the school do make a difference in terms of student math achievement variation. So after we introduced the school level variables, from the 44% variation that we identified in our baseline model, we were able to achieve like 10% variation explained by just 2 variables, whether the test was in English or the leadership or instructional leadership that were filled out by the teachers. And our conclusion is basically that school characteristics such as principal leadership matters to student academic achievement, and also the home characteristics like the early literacy numeracy skills, which is basically developed before the school entry. Some simple activities, when parents read books to their kids and do some simple counting, like math skills, do have a positive effect on academic achievement. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Abdulaziz. Thank you, Ayeshah. And this is really intriguing. Should get some link for this interesting research later on.
Thank you.
Our last paper is presented by Priti Verma and Verma, measuring quality of privately owned early childhood care and education centers in the United Arab Emirates, Ras Al Khaimah case study. Priti, you may start your paper now.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah.
Welcome.
Okay, I think this is pretty clear now.
It's clear.
So, yeah, okay. So my presentation is actually divided into 4 parts. First, I would want to tell what high quality early education, early childhood care and education looks like, the research findings from the study, and what I understood, what were actually the factors which were contributing to the status of these nurseries and daycares in the Ras Al Khaimah Emirate, and few key policy recommendations. For everybody's information, Ras Al Khaimah is one of the 7 Emirates in the United Arab Emirates. And here I will be talking about high quality early childhood care and education. So the care of young children is increasingly a shared responsibility of not just the parents, but I think also the families, communities, governments, private enterprises worldwide. And also the percentage of young children who are attending the daycares or early childhood centers or nurseries, the number is increasing exponentially. This has kind of led to the mushrooming of these early childhood care centers. But what I want to emphasize is that it is not just the provision, which is important for the children's optimal development, but the focus of the governments, the focus of the private enterprises and the families should be to provide quality education. There has been enough research which shows that the low quality care and education in early years may lead to some compromised development. So I would stress and emphasize that it's really important that all the children should have equal access to high quality care in early years. So these are some of the questions which I will be covering in the next 4 or 5 slides. Why is high quality ECEC important? What is actually the impact of high quality care on children? What contributes to high quality care in education? And what's actually the international and UAE's progress towards high quality care in early years? So there has been a lot of literature which has reported the impact of high quality care and education in childhood. So some of these studies have reported short-term effects, positive impact on the vocabulary, language, math, social skills, relationship with peers. The school readiness has improved. The communication skills in the children are better. They are more open to take risks, and their logical reasoning has improved. Whereas the long-term effects on the children has been on the improved well-being. There has been some studies which have reported the impact on social development. They are more these children are more socially adept when they become adults. The academic achievement in school is better. The increased productivity and higher incomes is by 25% in adulthood. So in a way, investing in high quality early childhood care and provisions can save the money of the parents, the families, and also the governments. And there are also some reports of having good care on negative, or I would say the reduced crime rates in the society. There has been a recent study by Professor James Heckman, who has talked about intergenerational effects, and he has reported some effects on healthy behaviors, more education, better employment, and even stable marriages. So the research literature is quite supportive of high quality care. This slide talks about the key contributors of high quality care and education. And it says that if the principal focus of a center or of a nursery is on the child, then it leads to better quality, which means caring for the child's feelings, try to make him independent, focusing on the innate playfulness and the curious nature of the child. Also, if the pedagogy in that center or in the nursery, if it is play-based, it includes dialogic and collaborative talk. There is a use of inquiry-based approach. And the role of teachers is that of a facilitator, but not of a traditional teacher to just pass on the information. So these have led to high quality care and education. Similarly, if the curriculum is based on, I would say it is student directed or it is child directed, there is ample opportunity for the children to play, less focus on formal learning, but main focus on optimal development of the children. And the development should be in all 5 domains, I would say, not just on cognitive. Again, these have reported have a big contribution on high quality care and education. Moreover, if there is a provision for the teachers for continuous training and professional development so that they can learn best practices, that has also shown some impact on the high quality care. So actually the quality of early childhood education and care centers is assessed by the process quality and the structural quality. So what I mean by that, the process quality is the dynamic aspects of the ECE program, which means the experiences which the child gains, the environment which the child gets in the center, the stimulations, the books, focus on the child, the language, the relationship between the child and the teacher. So these are some of the indicators of the process quality, as I just mentioned. I forgot to mention the interaction between child and the peer. I think that's really important. And parent and community participation. So the process quality includes all this. It is a bit difficult to measure the process quality. So often this part of the center is sometimes overlooked by the education regulators because it's difficult to be measured, but it has been found to have
5 minutes.
an impact. Okay. The structural quality is much easier to assess. It includes the staff-child ratio, teacher qualifications, stabilizing of staffing, play provisions. Structural quality is usually the first thing which the parents look for, but I would say that it's also important for the parents to look for the process quality indicators. Internationally, there has been a lot of drive towards high quality early childhood education and care. There has been a variation in developed and developing countries in this area. However, United Nations has stated that by 2030, there should be quality early childhood development, care, and pre-primary education for all boys and girls. So this is a big and ambitious goal, quality early childhood development. Where we are in UAE, there has been a lot of, I would say, drive towards the welfare of children in the age group of 0 to 8. UAE National Agenda Vision 2021 was released. Abu Dhabi Early Childhood Authority was established almost 2 years ago, and they have released Abu Dhabi Early Childhood Development 2035. It's a 15-year strategy. And UAE has, I think it has launched this week, if I'm right, a 50-year child development plan. So there has been a lot of focus and a drive towards ensuring good early childhood care and education in the country. In this segment, I would be focusing on the main research findings. So 39 licensed private and kindergartens or nurseries were studied in Ras Al Khaimah. So this is a census study. And I had used two tools, Eckers Revised, as well as the class. So early childhood environment rating scale was used mainly because it examines both the structural as well as the process quality. Whereas the class, which is classroom assessment scoring system, it mainly focuses on the process quality. Both are widely used tools, and there has been a lot of research done in this area by using these tools. The one limitation of this study, which I see, is that probably there was some staging possible because I had to take measurements for this data. I would say that this is what the overall Eckers average scores were. And if you see, we did not have any nursery in this excellent range on the Eckers score. However, there were 6 nurseries which were in the inadequate or the minimal range, which is a bit concerning. So a lot of professional development and support has been given to these nurseries. So this is the overall data on the Eckers. The next slide is giving some detailed information about where the nurseries were in terms of the 7 subscales on Eckers. And as you can see from this graph, the results are varied. There are some positive outcomes, as you can see from the parent and the staffing subscale, but there are some concerning figures if you look at the language reasoning, activities, and program structure, which definitely is an area of improvement. So I had focused on, I had kind of highlighted the concerning ones, which definitely can guide the policymakers. And again, we had similar data on the class results. And you can see that there is again a lot of improvement required in, I would say.
I'm finished.
Okay, can I take 30 seconds to?
Sorry.
Is that okay?
Sorry, I can't. It's done.
Okay.
Sorry. Maybe we can continue with the questions.
No
All
problem.
right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Priti, thank you. I thank all our presenters for these really intriguing and insightful topics, and I'm so happy that we are able to convene in such difficult times. Okay, I also want to thank all our participants and attendees here. I can see there are several comments here, but I'm not going to read these. We are going to take your questions. If anyone would like to answer a question, please ask questions. Please jump in and tell us your name and your questions. We will have 10 minutes rather than 15 minutes because we have eaten the start of this session, this panel.
Dr. Abdullah, I see a question on the question and answer box.
Okay, where's that? I didn't see that.
Yes, from David Dungus.
Is that a comment? I think it was a comment.
It's a Q&A
Okay.
box. Yes.
Let me see if he can use. Okay, so is it a comment for you? I really appreciate your analysis from TIMSS. You explained that the effects much higher education anticipated, suggesting that. But do you think that? All right, there is a question that the school level factors are also correlated with household level factors, given that household characteristics are linked with where households send their children to school, especially in private education? Okay, that's a very good
Yeah,
question.
let me first thank.
You take 1 minute, please.
Okay, David, for this great question. And yes, you're right. Some factors are also correlated with the school factors, but I would not say much maybe correlation, given the education system in the Gulf is mostly funded publicly. And but even with that point, we also accounted for the home characteristic in our model. So even after we hold constant or adjust for any variation that's coming from the whole household, we still see an effect of the school factors. I did not say school factors do matter more than the household factors, but I just said that the school factors do make a difference. They're not, their effect is not negligible. It's a large effect that I think further research is needed to identify exactly what is going on at the school level that do matter for the math achievement. But as you can tell from the baseline model, the first one, we basically ask how much variation in the school math achievement or the student math achievement coming from the within school, which give us an idea of how much variation is between students, and how much variation coming from the school levels, like how much schools do differ from each other. And we found 44% of the variation in the student math achievement is lies at the school level, and that's, I think, it's kind of a first step to further investigate.
Thank you. All right, thank you. I have another question. Thank you, Abdulaziz. I have another question from Tisam Naji. It's in Arabic. بالنسبة لتعليم اللغة العربية كلغة ثانية ما بدأت تشارك في درس الإمارات. It says, how far is Arabic language now becoming a second language in the UAE? And this, I assume, is for Juwaeriah. Yeah, for Juwaeriah, this question.
Right.
Juwaeriah, can you answer this?
So can you
Is it becoming a second language?
So when I say it's second language, I mean that's the second language that they're taught in school.
Yeah.
Because English, most of the schools that expat children go to are private schools here. So not public, private schools where the first medium of instruction is English. And Arabic is taught as the second or third language. But what is happening is, even if they are native speakers of, say, Urdu, Tamil, etc., from what I have interviewed a lot with parents and stuff, I see that there's a growing trend again of English being primary language now. So automatically, like what the second language they learn becomes the second language for them. Because that's all, only English and a little bit of Arabic from school.
Okay, I hope that's clear. Thank you, Juwaeriah. I have a question to Priti. How can policymakers balance access between access and quality?
So this is
in relation to early childhood. This is for Priti.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I think by early childhood teacher training and upskilling the current teachers, I think the gap between the provision and the quality can be reduced, because I think that's the most effective option, which the governments and the policymakers can focus on and have immediate effects.
Okay. All right. Okay. I do have a question to Juwaeriah. What do you mean by meta-theoretical framework? I mean, I like the word meta-theoretical, but I don't know. What do you mean?
So,
can you?
Yeah, so it's essentially a framework that transcends disciplinary boundaries.
Okay.
So I'm borrowing like one theory, which is the Donnier system, motivational system, which is very core in applied linguistics. And I'm combining elements of that with complexity theory, which is from the systems sciences, systems theory.
Okay.
So you basically combine theories from two different fields, which are generally not studied together. And then you obviously have to make sure that your research techniques are applicable and it's a bit of you have to break a little bit of ground there, because usually that transition is not very comfortable, especially because well, you have your own discipline boundaries, and applied linguistics usually stick with that understanding of how it should be and should not be.
Yeah.
So, and my background, I did a master's in system science engineering, and then
Great.
when I moved to the UAE, I started looking at this language as a system problem, and now that's
Okay.
why I'm borrowing my understanding of systems, dynamic systems, changing into understanding the motivation as a system.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. I do have another question. I don't know what's the name, to Abdulaziz and Ayeshah. The question is, well, do you make interviews with the fourth graders instead of using just these quantitative like numbers and variables? Did you use any accounts from the fourth graders themselves, like interviews? How did they experience that, or how do they see this whole competition and experience? And maybe probably, yeah. I think the question is about the math as a cultural being. It's not.
I see. We did a quantitative, so I guess that the person who asked the question may be more aligned with the qualitative, theory. And no, we used the quantitative approach. The data were just collected from students, their parents, their teachers, and their principals. And we use an existed data. We have not collected, as you all can tell, because 38,000 students from 6 countries coming from more than 1,500 schools is not possible for any researcher or team to do without, huge funding from countries. So it's already existed, the data, and we just, used the available data to further elaborate on what could the school, at the school level, what could be done in order to increase math achievement for students.